Appeal to emotion. Appeal to emotion is a logical fallacy where emotion is used to persuade people, bypassing logical arguments. While emotions are a natural part of human experience and can enrich our understanding of the world, relying solely on emotional appeal can lead to skewed perceptions and poor decision-making. This fallacy can be particularly powerful and manipulative, as it taps into human feelings such as fear, pity, or joy to sway opinions, sometimes in the absence of factual evidence. For instance, political campaigns often use emotional appeals to garner support, highlighting stories that invoke fear, hope, or anger rather than focusing on practical policies or evidence-based outcomes. Advertisements also frequently employ this tactic, appealing to feelings of inadequacy or aspiration to promote products. While these strategies can be effective in achieving certain goals, they do not necessarily lead to a rational or balanced understanding of the issues at hand. To avoid being swayed by mere emotional appeals, it is crucial to seek out substantive information and rational argumentation that can complement emotional perspectives. Engaging critically with the reasons and evidence behind emotionally charged claims helps maintain a balanced view that considers both emotional and logical aspects of an argument. 2 Quoque, U2. The 2 Quoque fallacy, often called the U2 fallacy, involves avoiding criticism by turning it back on the accuser. This is a type of ad hominem attack where instead of addressing the validity of the argument presented, the person being criticized counters by attacking the critic's behavior or beliefs in a similar area. This fallacy diverts the focus from the original issue to the behavior of the person making the criticism, thereby avoiding the substantive issue at hand. For example, imagine a scenario where a parent tells their child not to smoke because it's unhealthy, and the child responds, "But you smoke too." Here, the child's response does not address the validity of the parent's argument about smoking being unhealthy. Instead, it shifts the focus to the parent's own behavior. The child's response may be factually correct but is logically irrelevant to the argument about the health risks of smoking. To counteract the 2 Quoque fallacy, it's important to focus on the argument rather than the characteristics or inconsistencies of the person making the argument. Recognizing that the validity of an argument is independent of the person presenting it helps maintain a rational and focused discussion on the actual issues rather than personal conduct.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
No True Scotsman. The No True Scotsman fallacy is an informal fallacy that occurs when an appeal to purity is used to dismiss relevant criticisms or flaws of an argument. It involves modifying a generalization to exclude a counterexample by appealing to a vague notion of purity, thus shifting the terms of the argument. For instance, if someone claims, "No Scotsman puts sugar in his porridge," and another replies, "My Uncle Angus is Scottish, and he puts sugar in his porridge," the original claimant might retort, "Well, no true Scotsman would do that." Here, the definition of a true Scotsman is shifted to exclude any counterexample that contradicts the original claim, thereby dismissing inconsistencies without genuine argument. This fallacy is particularly insidious because it allows one to dismiss actual evidence that may disprove a general claim by arbitrarily redefining the terms. To avoid this fallacy, it is crucial to define terms clearly and stick to those definitions. Acknowledging exceptions and modifying claims to reflect evidence more accurately ensures a more honest and effective argument. Loaded question. A loaded question is a question that contains a presupposition, implicit assumptions within it, that corners the respondent into a position they might not necessarily endorse. Answering the question as it is formulated often indirectly confirms the assumption embedded within it. An example of a loaded question is, "Have you stopped wasting money on useless gadgets?" This question presupposes that the person has been wasting money on gadgets. Whether the person answers yes or no, they inadvertently agree to the premise of having previously wasted money, which might not be true. To effectively handle a loaded question, one can challenge the premise behind the question instead of answering it directly. This approach involves identifying and addressing the assumption, thus avoiding the trap set by the question's formulation. Guilt by association. Guilt by association is a fallacy where someone's argument is discredited by associating it with an undesirable person or group, regardless of the argument's merits. This fallacy leverages negative perceptions to dismiss and discredit arguments without addressing their substance. For example, if a political leader proposes a policy, and critics dismiss it solely because similar policies are endorsed by unpopular figures, they commit the guilt by association fallacy. The policy's value is ignored, and judgment is based instead on disliked individuals or groups associated with similar ideas. A robust approach to avoiding this fallacy involves evaluating arguments based on their merits, independent of who supports or proposes them, ensuring that decisions and opinions are formed based on evidence and reason rather than prejudice or emotional reactions. Cherry-picking, selective evidence. Cherry-picking, or selective evidence, is a fallacy where only evidence that supports one's position is presented, while evidence against the position is withheld or ignored. This creates a distorted picture of reality, as the full context and range of data are not considered. For instance, if a pharmaceutical company publishes only positive trials of a new drug while ignoring failed trials, they are cherry-picking data. This misleading practice can lead to incorrect conclusions, as the overall effectiveness and safety of the drug are not accurately represented. To counter cherry-picking, it is essential to look at all relevant evidence, both supporting and contradicting, to get a comprehensive understanding of the topic at hand. This practice fosters a more balanced and informed perspective, essential for sound decision-making. False cause. The false cause fallacy, also known as post hoc ergo propter hoc, after this, therefore because of this, is the erroneous assumption that just because one thing follows another, the first thing caused the second. This fallacy often appears in situations where correlations between events are mistaken for causations. For instance, suppose someone notices that whenever they wear their lucky socks, their favorite team wins. They might conclude that wearing these socks somehow influences the game's outcome. This is a classic example of the false cause fallacy because the conclusion ignores other factors like the team's skill or the opponent's condition, focusing instead on a coincidental and unrelated event. The key to avoiding the false cause fallacy is to look for actual evidence of causation rather than merely correlation. One should seek mechanisms that explain how one event could reasonably lead to another and consider other potential causes. This deeper analysis helps maintain rational decision-making and avoid simplistic conclusions based on sequential observations. Equivocation. Equivocation occurs when a key term is used in multiple senses within the same argument, creating a misleading impression. This often happens when an ambiguous word with multiple meanings is used in different parts of an argument, leading to a confusion or a shift in the argument's logical structure. A classic example is, "The pen is mightier than the sword." Therefore, writing utensils are more effective weapons than blades. Here, the word pen is used metaphorically to represent the written word in the first statement, but is taken literally as a physical pen in the conclusion. The shift in meaning leads to a faulty conclusion. To avoid falling into the equivocation fallacy, it's crucial to clarify terms and ensure they are used consistently throughout an argument. Precision in language not only enhances clarity but also strengthens the argument's integrity. Appeal to tradition. The appeal to tradition is a logical fallacy that argues something is better or correct simply because it is older or traditional. This fallacy assumes that longevity or historical precedence is a guarantee of value or correctness. For example, arguing that a medical practice is superior because it's been used for thousands of years commits this fallacy. It ignores the possibility that the practice could be outdated or less effective compared to modern methods. Traditions might provide valuable insights, but they do not inherently justify practices without critical examination of their current relevance and effectiveness. To counter the appeal to tradition, one should evaluate practices based on evidence of their effectiveness and relevance today, rather than their age or tradition alone. This approach fosters progress and prevents stagnation in practices and beliefs. Genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy occurs when a claim is judged good or bad based on its source rather than its merits. This fallacy dismisses or accepts arguments based solely on where or who they come from, rather than assessing the actual argument or evidence. For instance, rejecting a scientifically sound conclusion because it was presented by a corporation, or accepting a flawed argument because it comes from a prestigious institution, are examples of this fallacy. Both instances fail to engage with the actual content of the argument. The best way to avoid the genetic fallacy is to focus on the evidence and reasoning presented, rather than the origin or the presenter. Evaluating the argument based on its own merits ensures unbiased and rational conclusions. Ambiguity. The ambiguity fallacy involves using ambiguous language to mislead or misrepresent the truth. This can occur when words with double meanings or unclear phrases are used intentionally to confuse or deceive. Imagine a politician who says, "We will eliminate poverty," which sounds promising but is vague enough to mean a range of things from reducing to completely eradicating poverty. The ambiguity allows the speaker to claim success under less stringent criteria later. To navigate away from this fallacy, clarity and specificity in language are essential. Demanding precise definitions and clear expressions in arguments helps prevent misunderstandings and manipulations based on ambiguous terms. The fallacy of composition. The fallacy of composition arises when one assumes that what is true for one part of a group or a system must also be true for the whole. This kind of reasoning can lead to incorrect conclusions because the properties of individual components do not necessarily extend to an entire group or system. For example, consider a scenario where someone observes that a particular athlete on a basketball team is exceptionally tall. If they conclude that the entire basketball team must be exceptionally tall because of this one athlete, they commit the fallacy of composition. This assumption overlooks the possibility that the rest of the team could be of average or varied heights. This fallacy often appears in economic and social arguments. For instance, claiming that because individual savings are good for individual financial health, everyone saving as much as possible is good for the economy overlooks the fact that if everyone drastically increases their savings simultaneously, it could reduce consumer spending, leading to economic slowdown or recession. To avoid the fallacy of composition, it is crucial to assess whether the observed characteristics of parts can logically be extended to the whole. This involves understanding the interactions and dependencies within the system rather than making assumptions based on isolated observations. Recognizing that what is good or true for a part may not necessarily be good or true for the whole can lead to more accurate and nuanced understanding.